Welcome to the Path 11 podcast with your hosts, Mike and April. We would like to continue our episode from last week with Todd Acamesis, and this is part 2 of our interview.
Your workshops where you do out-of-body, group out-of-body workshops, is that true?
That is true, yes.
Do you have a specific technique that works for out-of-body in a group setting, or do you do multiple, like, say, this type of person may need the target technique?
Okay, well, I would say for our workshops, we run 3-day weekend events, and we run a 9-day completely immersive event. The last one we ran in France, and we had Tom Campbell come as one of our speakers. So during that sort of the structure of those events, we would practice and we would teach things like the target technique, which is, if you like, very dependable techniques. If you, once again, like William Buhlman would suggest in his book, if you were to sort of use one technique for a period of 30 to 60 or 90 days, with your consistency, with your conviction, something's going to happen at some point, especially taking on board what I've said about a top-down practice versus a bottom-up practice. What that means is you don't just take the target technique and practice that every day for 30 minutes. You have to be in that mindset of constant growth, always looking for a feedback loop. So let's say, for example, you're practicing the target technique, and let's say you're executing that technique to a T, but you find that where you can easily visualize and you can wander around, your mind also equally drifts, and you get that mind drift, and suddenly you're not even focusing on the technique. When you are focusing on the technique, you're really, sort of doing well. But then when you have these moments where your mind drifts and you're unproductive, I would say out of a 90-minute practice, which is the style we teach people time length wise, for a longer session, because it mimics the sort of the sleep rhythm, so a sleep cycle, as well as the Eutridium rhythm of daytime. So we sort of teach that style. We do teach shorter practice times, but that's about the ideal we find. And within that 90 minutes, the average person will probably only, if they're really honest with themselves and take inventory here, they're only really focused for about maybe 5 or 10 minutes of that time over the stretch of 90 minutes, maybe a minute here, a minute there, but not much more than that. So one of the additional practices, ideas that we would teach would be that they need to increase, the strength of their mental muscles. So just like in a physical sort of gym, they're going into the mental gym and they're learning to flex these mental muscles. So for example, if they're practicing the target technique and suddenly their mind drifts, their purpose for being in that session is to have an out-of-body experience and to practice these techniques. So the intention is I now bring my focus back onto the technique. So that's rep number 1, just like being in the gym, rep 1, 2, 3. And as we increase the reps, we start to increase strength. So every single time somebody's mind drifts, we teach them, okay, this is where you become aware that your mind has drifted. You don't get upset or frustrated with yourself, or irritated. You just laugh about it inwardly, smile, say, wow, I really have a lot of strength, to work on here. And you rep number 1, you bring yourself back into focus. If you drift again, rep number 2, bring yourself back into focus. So part of that top-down practice is always finding areas of that 90 minutes where you're practicing to where you can sort of tweak part of the system, part of your practice. But it doesn't stop there. We would ask people to then read, if they're on a train, traveling to work, commuting to work, to read a book on the topic so they can learn new ideas, learn from other teachers, because sometimes people connect with me really, really well, and sometimes they connect with other teachers, in other ways for other reasons. So it's important to have a range of teachers to learn from. And, even from children, just recently, well, not recently now, but about a year ago, I made a post on Facebook of this 9-year-old girl who was sharing her view of how to have an out-of-body experience, and to really feel like you're the wind. It was a very profound experience, idea for having experiences. So we teach pretty much all the standard OBE techniques. We also have some very non-standard ideas, but I would say we're all about the psychology side of this as well, where we will help people understand that they have this sort of inner team, these sub-personalities. And, you know, people can come to a workshop and they can be like, oh, man, I'm really ready to go. They're all gung-ho. They're ready to have an experience. But they may not realize that although they may not consciously be registering fear, somewhere within their inner community, there will be fear. And that fear will stop them from having experiences. So we get people that have been on sort of the OBE treadmill, going from one workshop to another, reading one book to another, years of practice and not getting any results. And then they come to our workshops and they suddenly are getting somewhere again because we teach this top-down process. We help them understand the psychological, emotional blocks that can prevent them from having an experience. It's almost like sometimes there can be a subpersonality, another aspect of our consciousness, which is so overwhelmed with having an in-body experience, let alone an out-of-body experience. You know, it's like, I don't want to go to another level of reality. I'm too fearful about this level. You know, so we teach people how to really connect with those other parts that are currently blocking them from having experiences, literally standing in the way and withholding the energy that they need. And part of that energy sort of blocking you can find in everyday practices is procrastination. People will come to workshops and they'll go home with the best of intention and then procrastinate, and they sort of just find distraction after distraction that gets in the way. This is a clear sign. This is a signal from another aspect of your consciousnness, a subpersonality that is telling you, this frightens the bejesus out of me. If you listen to me, if you focus some awareness on me, if you give me your presence and let me help you understand my needs, I can then contribute. I can then start to apply that extra little bit of energy that can help us have this experience. Now, for some people listening, they might think, okay, where's Todd going with this? Sounds like he's saying we have multiple personalities and, you know, yada, yada. To a degree, yes, this is correct. You know, we have trauma or wounding experiences in our lives where literally there are parts of our consciousness that will sort of be retained within a psychic space within our minds, which will sit there dwelling on past experiences. And whenever something in our sort of everyday lives, you know, something in the external world is interpreted by a part of us, it can trigger this part of us. And that part can then, like I said, withdraw energy, withhold energy, go into a stonewalling mode, can block you from having an experience. And again, procrastination is a classic signal that this is happening. So we don't just discuss techniques. We go heavily into the psychology side of this to where, you know, we really help people shift these emotional blockages that are standing in the way of the out-of-body energy, which is always there. If you want to have an out-of-body experience, you don't have to lie down and get relaxed for 90 minutes. You should get to a point to where you could literally sit in a chair and induce the experience in 5 minutes. You should get to a point to where you practice standing up against a wall. You get to a point where you can practice walking and every now and again trigger a conscious experience. And if you're walking, then hopefully, and in most cases, yes, you would have a dual awareness experience. You would be fully aware of your physical body and your surroundings, equally aware of another environment altogether. So to us, yes, it's about this top-down practice where we're always pushing boundaries. We're always seeking feedback loops in order to make the practice better.
And are you able to have these experiences, like where you're walking or you're standing?
I'm at a level to where if I'm lying down and I'm in a proper practice where, you know, let's say month, 2 months without fail, every day I'm practicing, I can pretty much, you know, induce an experience at will, maybe 20 minutes maximum, 5 minutes to 20 minutes maximum. If I'm out of practice because life sometimes, even for me, gets in the way, then it could take a little bit longer, but I will still induce an experience. There are days where I can throw everything, including the kitchen sink and a Pandoras Star at it, and I'm going nowhere. You know, this happens. But for my sort of waking practice, if I'm sitting in a chair, yes, I can induce experiences that way too. If I'm standing up against walls, I have been able to experience, dual consciousness in that way. Walking around, it's still a challenge for me. It's more of a spontaneous occurrence when it does happen, but I'm getting there. And I do hope within a few years that, you know, this will be something that's natural for me again, just like it will and should be natural for all of us. It's just we're experiencing what's become our personal, normal sort of experience of reality, where we don't feel energy, We don't feel each other's feelings. We just, are so blocked up. So the idea here is that we're retraining ourselves, we're reconditioning ourselves, we're unconditioning ourselves from the belief systems that are standing in the way from being able to stand up and walk and have a multidimensional experience and be present in more than one field of consciousness simultaneously.
Wow, you just given me like a ton of information. I'm just trying to process it at the same time.
I like opening up a can of worms. It's all good.
And because I'm at the stage where, because of my right now with my wife's job and my job, we'll get up at like 3 a.m. My wife goes to work and I go back to sleep probably 5 a.m. for another maybe hour, 2 hours, and then I got to get up. I got to get my daughter on the bus to school and all that. But when I go back to sleep, I've had some pretty good experiences. Some were dreams, some were lucid dreams, and then there were out of body experiences. And they do kind of happen spontaneously for me. I can't will it yet. So I'm kind of working on that. And in my experiences, and I've mentioned this on past shows, we've had Teal Swan on. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
I am, yes.
Okay. And when we were talking to her, I kind of described the experience where I always feel like I'm like in this training, like I'm being trained to do this, and somebody is watching. There's always somebody. I don't know if they're watching or what they're doing, but there's always a presence of somebody in the room, and I'm just kind of hovering over the bed. Sometimes I feel like I'm on a rotisserie. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. And there's some experiences where, and I'm sure there's somebody listening who's been practicing, and you kind of get to the point where you go back to sleep and you get dropped into this spontaneous experience where you're like, I feel the vibrations coming on, I feel this sensation, but I'm too tired to. I gotta get the sleep, and I've had that where I've gone back to sleep. Then I've had experiences where the bed kind of feels like it's a pinball machine paddle, and it just kind of drops out from under you, and you just feel yourself drop into a situation or a vignette of an experience. I don't know if am I making sense or
you are. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Makes sense, and I absolutely identify with what you're saying. I find really interesting. This is a classic phenomena for a lot of people who practice this, and even for people who don't practice it, but become aware of out-of-body exploration or lucid dreaming. We do, like I alluded to earlier, we are currently living a double life, whether we're aware of it or not. And again, I would ask any listener out there to once again, I'm not asking you to suspend your belief systems, but at least to have an open mind and think, wait a second, could that be possible? Could it be that when I fall asleep at night, my one part of my consciousness, I tune out of this world and I tune into other worlds and other aspects of my being, and I am having adventures and conscious lucid adventures. But when I reintegrate my consciousness with more, it's not even really what's happening, but when my awareness shifts back into my physical waking body, that maybe there's a memory sort of download challenge that's taking place, which is, for most people, that is exactly what's happening. Even when you're sort of having that sort of describing that experience where you seem to almost be having a dream experience of yourself being trained, there's probably a part of your consciousness that is having that experience in real time, fully conscious, fully awake, fully lucid in the moment, but there's now like this delay being broadcast back to another level of your consciousness where it seems like it's in the third person, whereas for that other part of your consciousness, it's in the first person. It's happening for real in that moment, and there's no delay. There's no rerun of what took place. This is multidimensional reality. Time and space, as you'll hear many people suggest, is illusory. Yes, it doesn't seem much of an illusion here on this level of reality when we're in great pain or suffering, but that doesn't mean that to another level of your consciousness it doesn't seem illusory. So it's just coming at this once again with a level of openness that will start to naturally allow that flow, which is that natural flow, to take place. You will start having more of the experiences. Yes, at first it might be spontaneous, but the more you begin to apply yourself with purpose and intent, it will happen. One of my favorite personal out of body practices is to literally dial in. Say for myself, if I haven't been to a particular location on another level of reality, like an astral city, but I've heard another out of body explorer like William Bowman talk about, I have an access point. That is William Bowman's consciousness. He's hardwired to the same conscious field I'm hardwired to. So as I'm, drifting to that in between state, that borderline consciousness between wakefulness and these other levels of our being, I start to dial in. My purpose is I want to go there, and my intent is, I set my intent. So I have a purpose and intent. Purpose, I want to go to this astral city. Why do I want to go there? So I'll set that up, and I'll focus on that. And it's, again, like with science, we're learning to reduce the noise that surrounds the signal that we want to connect with. It's like taking a radio telescope and pointing it up to the sky, and suddenly being bombarded with all those signals from every object out there. We can, reduce that noise. We can, filter it out and start to connect with what we really truly desire to connect with. But another aspect of this, we really, again, have to address that power struggle that's taken place within. There'll be, a conflict of values. One part of your consciousness, an old belief system, will stand in the way of a new desire to have an experience. And you've got two ways to approach that. You either, sort of upgrade that belief system to be in alignment with that new desire, or you unfortunately download your new desire to be in alignment with an old belief system, which I'm sure not too many people want to do. That's exploring roads that we've already traveled and we know all too well. So I really identify with what you're talking about, and I find that this is probably an aspect of your consciousness. These trainers within these dream slash unconscious OBEs are encouraging you, to come out and play. They're helping you remember what they can help you remember. To serve as inspiration for you to take it deeper, but they realize it's up to you. You have free will to get in your own way. You wake up the next day and you have the best of intention. Tonight, I'm going to bed an hour earlier. You can read something from, say, Stephen LaBerge's, sort of book or website and latest research, where they find if you go to bed an hour earlier than usual, you get up an hour earlier than usual, you stay up for about 80 minutes, and then you take like a mid-morning nap, you're something like 70% more likely to induce a lucid dream. So it's stuff like this. You have to set, have this strong purpose and have this desire and follow through and have that level of conviction that makes sure that you do follow through. Because it is so easy sometimes to let life get in the way, to kid yourself, to make you think you're having a dedicated practice, when at best you're thinking about having a practice, and the alarm goes off and you don't really become conscious enough, and you fall right back to sleep into an unconscious state. So I think it is encouragement from your guides for sure, and these could be high-level guides, advanced parts of your own, spectrum of consciousness, which is there holding a space in multidimensional reality where for them it's effortless to do. There's time and space is an illusion to them from their vantage point. They're in a different time zone. So I would take encouragement from that. I would think, wow, that there are people who care about me. There are beings who care about me, and they're with me, from what I can tell, all the time. And and if there was a more advanced part of yourself, why would you not be able to? If we can get to a point like Tom Campbell talks about, he can open up, like in any given time, 4 data strings. He can run 4 separate intents simultaneously. I don't personally think there's an end to this. I think we can get to a point of it's just a matter of getting back to what's natural versus what's become normal.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I wanted to back up a little bit about some of the experiences before we go on. Now, from my own experience and from reading about some other experiences, I'm on some Facebook groups, and people post their experiences, and some of them I've read that you're kind of you're just lying there, you're in a meditation state, you have this intent to go out of body, or if it's a spontaneous, maybe you're thinking about what you're going to do in the day when you wake up later. But there's this physical consciousness, and then all of a sudden there's a blackout, and then you kind of reemerge into, all of a sudden you're in this altered state with the vibrations. Is that something you've had too, where it's like this blackout?
Yes, without a doubt. And I think there's several ways that people experience this stuff, and yes, that's one of them, where you're practicing, and then just for a moment, you let go just enough, and perhaps you fall unconscious, but it was just enough that you gave it, just enough sort of practice, just enough focus, that it stimulated the energy. It stimulated that sort of what we call the projected duplicate, the projection of the energy body, which will then have the experience. Perhaps you've induced the experience just enough, and you've just taken your foot off the accelerator. You fall into unconsciousness, but it's just enough to feel the vibrational state, come conscious again, and wham, you're on the other side. And I would totally agree with William Buhlman, where he writes in his book, that calling it an out-of-body experience is a misnomer. I completely agree with that idea. Ultimately, the mechanics we're dealing with here is a physical body, which in turn is still energy, so therefore it's still an energy body, but it's very dense. We're dealing then, second to that, we're dealing with an energy body state, which is directly energetically connected to the physical counterpart, which we call the energy body. Some people will be able to see the energy field of that counterpart, which we call it the aura. In Classton sort of spiritual teachings, we talk about the chakras. Those chakras will be in that energy body, which is an interface point between the physical body and other parts of our consciousness. And that particular part is not, there's nothing coming out of our bodies. There's nothing sort of leaving the body. We literally, it feels that way. And I understand how, the argument could be there for something coming out of our body, our spirit coming out of our body. But ultimately, your consciousness is shifting from physical awareness to this energy body awareness or beyond instantaneously. And your energy body might then be going slightly out of phase with the physical one. So they're not separated spatially. They're separated, only by sort of a different vibratory field of reality. And ultimately, like Tom Campbell would say, even these are just metaphors. The map is not the territory. So the mechanics behind this is different from suggesting something's coming out of your body. So it does make sense that, you can have like a blackout, like you say, and then suddenly be completely in another field of consciousness, be in another environment altogether, and then tune back in again. We've had for a lifetime this heavy programming that we are our physical bodies. We have this overly strong identity with our physical bodies. And yes, that helps us have an in-body experience, but that is not all that we are. We are not just physical beings. Sometimes you'll hear people say in, maybe spiritual or personal sort of development practices, they don't get the out-of-body stuff. They say things like, well, you've signed up to be here. You need to give all your focus to this level. And then those same people fall unconscious at night, and they're oblivious to the eternal now. This isn't just the here and now we're dealing with. We're dealing with, this potential of everything that we are. We talk about in spiritual circles that we label our universe the all that is. That means everything. That means eternity, for heaven's sake. That's a lot of potential. And if we're basically just saying to ourselves that, out of the maybe endless parallel lives, parallel versions of self that our soul is witnessing simultaneously, if we can't in one of these lives have a program where we're starting to wake up, we're starting to realize that we are not just physical bodies, that we do not just grow through pain, that we do not just have this physical journey to sort of focus on. We get to explore more. So we will have what we call a mental projection. We'll have what we label the classic out-of-body experience, where we feel the transition state, we feel vibrational energy, we feel pressure changes within our bodies. We might hear sounds or names being called, and then make that conscious transition where we're now standing next to our bed and witnessing what seems to be physical reality, but is in a sense a shadow of physical reality, because we're now on another dimensional level. No matter how much you see that shadow in real time and in Technicolor, full sort of HD quality. it's still technically you're witnessing, sort of an underlying energy of another reality. So there is so much to understand. And again, this is where the openness really comes into this, because sometimes people come to my workshops and they're very confused. They're like, I've been having this type of experience, but I don't know if it's an out-of-body experience, and I need to understand. I'm confused. And what they start to relay to me is what we call a mental projection, where literally they're sitting down in a chair and suddenly they're somewhere else in a blink of an eye. And they're fully in this other environment. That environment is just as real as the one that they just came from, the one that their physical body still sits in. And it's got physicality, and they just don't understand how they got there. And they start to label, oh, that's just my imagination. Imagination is what created this entire level of reality, for starters. So it's not just imagination, it's creative force itself. But if we start to get to a level of flexibility of mind, to where we let go of this overly strong identity with the body, we get to start exploring consciousness in a more natural way again. We literally get to just point our consciousness anywhere, and we arrive. We start to realize that if we are hardwired to this universe we call the all that is, then potentially we can be anywhere just by pointing our consciousness.
Now, at your workshops, do you talk about your experiences? Because I say that because in our films, we've talked to William Buhlman and Tom Campbell, and William will give somewhat of a description, of what he experienced. And, obviously in his books, he journaled a lot of his experiences. But Tom, once he, at the Monroe Institute, he gave some examples of early on, but he won't describe his experiences. Like, he pretty much won't say anything.
And I've encountered that, and I really understand where he's coming from.
Right.
He's saying to people like Monroe did, and I know Monroe filled 3 books with his experiences, but Monroe equally, what he did is very similar to what I do. I inspire people with some experiences, but I remind them that, once again, like I've already done in the context of this talk, the map is not the territory. This is a very subjective stuff. I mean, even Campbell would argue, is there truly anything objective about reality? So I think as long as people understand that, and they're really grounded in the idea that, this is my personal way of experiencing reality. You, me, April, a bunch of the listeners, we can all show up on the north rim of the Grand Canyon, but emotionally, we're going to connect in different ways with what we're experiencing. We're going to sort of filter that in our own unique ways based on our belief systems, our expectations, our preferences, our fears, all of that stuff. So I understand that, in a sense, Tom Campbell doesn't want to get in the way of other people having their own unique experiences. I get that. But equally, there are people out there that need to connect with teachers in other ways. There are people that will connect with Tom Campbell in the way, that is right for them, and probably won't connect with me in the same way they connect with Tom Campbell, and vice versa. So I think there is value in what Tom Campbell teaches, and for some people that will work. For other people, that system doesn't work. They need the inspiration. They need the motivation. They need to have a picture painted to a certain level that gives them the confidence that they're going to be okay on the other side, that they're not going to just sort of be left without a map of any description. So I think there's value in the various ways of teaching, and so that's my sort of take on it, if you like.
Yeah, and I know what you mean about how we kind of we need that inspiration, and we kind of, I'm able to connect with William's experiences fairly well, but I also appreciate Tom's books and his knowledge that what he does describe, and the nature of reality. So I do get both, and with our films, I don't know if and you know William and Tom both, that, and we try to explain this in our films, that William and Tom, they're kind of like the right and left brains. One is very analytical, and this is how, if you get X, X plus Y equals Z. But then you have William, who is, painting pictures, and, he was the art student in college, and Tom was the, physics major and studying science. And basically what I'm trying to say is I'm right in the middle of that, where you could see both, and you kind of said too that we both see, you appreciate Tom, but you can see William's experiences, with that. And I'm getting to a question. I kind of go on these tangents. I gotta kind of
Okay, Mike,
explain. I explain my mental processes. Well, there's so many different ways we could go with this too.
There are, and I think what most people ultimately need to do is they need to relax about this. They might hear from one teacher, this is the way to do it, and another teacher will say, no, 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 this is the way to do it. Ultimately, you need to sort of go inward, like every great avatar has suggested, through various teachings. Go inside, and I completely agree. You're going to find what makes you tick. You're going to find that already everything that we've discussed today, you already know. You already have answers to. You have that inward sort of reservoir of knowledge and wisdom and insight to draw upon. If people just relax a little bit more and stop taking it too serious in the sense, well, okay, no, this is the roadmap. No, 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 this is the roadmap. Let your journey be unique to you. Take inspiration from wherever you can take it. Leave what doesn't serve you. Use the rest. Connect the rest with everything else that you've got. Like I teach at my workshops, if somebody comes to me and they've already sort of enjoyed journeying with William Bowman or Tom Campbell or one of the many other amazing, facilitators around the world, I will literally say to them, what I teach you this weekend, what I teach you over the period of 9 days does not supersede what they've already taught you. It adds to it. Like Robert Monroe would say, it's like an admixture. You're taking all of this good stuff and you're mixing it together and you're making it better. So ultimately, this is what I would say to all, everyone out here who's hearing this message. That is the message. This is your journey. If you feel some types of methodologies get in the way, get those methodologies out of the way. Go and explore something else. But ultimately, if you're tuning into your own energy, to your own guidance, you will know what feels right for you.
That makes sense. And another thing I wanted to ask you too, since you're pretty proficient with out-of-body experiences, and Tom has said this on camera to us, and in the podcast with Teal Swan, she had mentioned this, and William, we didn't actually directly ask this, but he kind of implied that he does this, is that when you do become proficient in becoming out-of-body or in these altered states, and you're pretty lucid, the universe kind of puts you to work. Is that true?
Oh, yes, it definitely puts you to work, yes. Like I was suggesting when I was out of body teaching on another level, I mean, this has become common, for me now, to the point where I would say out of every 3 out-of-body experiences where I'm on another field of reality beyond the immediate earth plane, yes, I am probably being used as a conduit to teach. I mean, even with one of my recent experiences, which, was like a full circle. When I was a child and I started having these experiences, I would come out of my body. Again, I didn't know what that, know there was labeling for it. I wasn't able to articulate it in a grandiose sort of way, but I knew it was different. I would meet, sometimes the same people. So I would be guided by beings. Some were human, some were non-human consciousness. I would be sort of directed to locations where there were other children, and we would be taught stuff. We might then wake back into our bodies, and it could seem like a dream. For me, a lot of these were very conscious experiences, and I found that the stuff that I was being taught sometimes matched up to my physical waking life. And I could apply some of the things that I was learning. So that made sense. And I think that happens for all of us. So I'd sort of have these experiences as a child. And then a year ago, I had an experience which, like I said, brought me full circle. I have these full circle moments a lot, but this one in particular was properly full circle in the sense that I came out of my body, or I made the transition, as I stated, and I was sort of near my apartment block and suddenly got this feeling in my energy body that I needed to be like Superman. And so I launched myself up into the atmosphere, up and up and up and up and went, but at a really in a controlled way or directed way, and suddenly found myself in what you could say was the upper atmosphere. But this is obviously from another vantage point, another dimension of reality, sort of overlooking physical reality is a decent enough way to describe it for the purpose of this conversation. And I'm now up in above the Earth's atmosphere, like in a position to what you would expect an astronaut or cosmonaut in the International Space Station, looking back down at Earth. And in this moment, I had Africa and Europe sort of underneath me, and I was in total awe. Out of up to that date, 9 years of other out of body experiences and other levels of consciousness, alien worlds, but it is truly special to stand above your own homeworld and appreciate the beauty and the how fragile this actually is. And this protective instinct does come up in that moment. So I'm there appreciating this when suddenly, energetically, I get this tug, several tugs on my energy, and I could feel that, these are humans. And they're coming up from points below me, and they were children. There were about 6 of them in total. And they just left their bodies like I would have done at their age when I was a child. And they were now hovering around me. And in the moment, I get this download inside of me that says that they've come to be taught by me how to teach them how to teleport while out of body to various points around the planet. My mouth like sort of just dropped open in awe of this opportunity. I've taught on other levels. I've met many out of body explorers from this level and other levels and taught. I've taught people on the astral, but to teach children, which even in my waking physical practice, and I've not done much of on this level, but so suddenly I have these 6 children around me, all excited. To them, it probably seems like a dream. Maybe to one of them, it seems something more. And we pretty much taught them how to sort of move around to different points around the planet. And I remember then convening at one point above the planet again, and one of the children saying, "Can we go into outer space?" And I was like, "Of course we can," and immediately had this underlying intention, and I shot like a rocket right away from the near physical plane right into another plane of reality altogether, and thinking to myself, "Oh, this is going to go down well." I can just see it in the astral newspapers. Teacher loses track of six young students on the Earth plane, and but I knew obviously they were going to go through their sleep cycles. Their bodies would wake up. They would have their consciousness, their awareness drawn back to their physical bodies. And I remember thinking to myself, I hope one of them wakes up, remembers the experience this morning, is sitting around the breakfast table with their mother, and they say, "Mommy, I had this amazing experience. I went to Egypt, and we went to the Amazon, and we even went to this thing that was called the Hornet's Nest down in Antarctica, where there was aliens, and we had all this kind of fun, and da-da-da-da-da, and there was this man, he had this wild hair, and he taught us these things." And to me, it just, like I said, it felt like a full circle, like I'd just experienced teaching like I was taught as a child. And I've even come to realize now, because time and space is mutable, it is something that is flexible. It is a belief system. It is rule sets based on this reality, that we can meet ourselves from different timelines. We can have experiences where we're guiding ourselves. And it just sparked so much in my imagination on that day. It gave me so much inspiration and made me feel very proud, to be honest, that I was taking part in this bigger picture landscape, and the universe was seeing me as a useful human being on more than one level of reality.
It's pretty amazing, because when you think about it, it's the way you described it. It's almost like, who is the student here and who is the teacher?
Absolutely. I completely agree.
You kind of maybe you got a little bit more at it than the kids did.
To be honest, Mike, I'm pretty sure I did. I'm really sure I did, because I came back from that experience, and there are experiences that will forever change you, and you can't go back to a certain level of thinking once it does. And again, I've had some pretty deep experiences of non-human consciousness, other systems, other ET systems, but even experiences of this nature, with children, working with children, and the profound effect it's having, that in itself is so worthy. It's so worthy, and it will change you. It will change your core beliefs. It will challenge everything you know about reality, but in a good way.
And that kind of brings me to the next question. And Yeah, I'm probably, with your workshops, I'm assuming that you've had this before, would be shared experiences. I know you mentioned William Buellman walking into
Yes.
your classroom on the astral plane, but uh, is
Yeah.
there, did you consciously go into with maybe a couple friends or a group from a workshop and say, we're going to meet at this location in the astral plane? And have you have had any experience like that?
Yes, I would say tens and tens of experiences like that, in the sort of sense where yes, we program it, we set the intent, we have a purpose. Sometimes it works out where you do meet people, but they're unconscious and they don't remember the journey. Once they wake up, or it's vice versa. You're having an experience and maybe I don't remember on return journey. That happens. Also, it can be in a spontaneous way, and for me, it is spontaneous a lot. I'll bump into people that I know from this level reality, or I'll bump into counterparts of their consciousness because it works that way too. You're not always bumping into the person that you think you're bumping into, as in the physical conscious being that you know from physical Earth. You're bumping into a spectrum of their energy, another counterpart level of them, and sometimes the real clue to that is that they're um, their appearance is different, their awareness is different. They're able to sort of, you're experiencing another level of them. So it can happen in many different ways. But when it happens in the sense to where you're in that near Earth field and you meet somebody and then decide to sort of go on a journey together and you both reintegrate back into the physical body with full consciousness from end to end, those kind of experiences are more rare, but they are real deep validation for all involved. And what we usually do at the workshops, the 9-day one in particular, we have a password system where I say to people, okay, at the very beginning stages of the experience, to say, you're to come up with a password. Do not write it down in your physical journal. Do not tell other people. If you then, while inducing the experience, become conscious in the near Earth field in particular, and you bump into other participants in that state who are conscious enough, you're to exchange passwords. And we have had a real good success with exchanging passwords in those sort of situations, and it blows the doors off for everybody when we're back in a group setting and we're sharing experience and somebody puts up their hand and says, okay, I think I made a successful password swap. And a couple other people are like, yeah, I think I did too. And then you have the two people in particular who made the swap write down their passwords. They then pass both their passwords to a third party in the room, and they then both announce their passwords, and then that person reads out the passwords they wrote down. And when it clicks and when it's bang on the money, it's magic, and everybody in the room feels it, and it serves as powerful inspiration. So if somebody there hasn't yet had an experience, they suddenly get more motivated. They suddenly have that inspiration to sort of get more willpower, because willpower is part of this journey for us,
Right.
and it does serve a purpose. So yes, the shared out of body experience is a powerful validator. I've had many, and the people involved have come back again forever changed.
Yeah, I know like especially for Tom, that was kind of his belief moment or his aha moment, that that shared experience. You come back and of course his was recorded, so he heard him talking with Dennis, the other engineer at the Monroe Institute, talking. You know that is kind of like the moment of belief, and you kind of start shedding your old belief systems, and I could see how that could be very beneficial, especially in a group setting at a workshop when you have that.
Absolutely. And at some stage, when you have phenomena like that presented to you and it's in your face, you have to at some point let go of the doubt. You have to let it go, and you have to allow, that openness to take you deeper, because again, that openness is our true state of being. I find, whatever level of reality I go to, there can be, sort of a level of openness about that place. It's just our beliefs that are getting in the way. It's our expectations, our preferences, all this sort of what you could consider baggage that can sometimes get in the way. Sure, it can serve a purpose, but sometimes we dwell in certain beliefs for too long. Sometimes we dwell within certain energy for too long, and we take on the energy of what we're dwelling in, and we suddenly believe this is who we are.
I have to ask too. Have you come across the it kind of taps into the beliefs a little bit, shedding belief systems? Have you tapped into the fear tests yet that William talks about in our film? And I think it's in his book too, that he runs into like a giant sloth with the fangs and the claws or whatever. He feels like he's about to be ripped to shreds, but then he confronts his fear, and then the sloth actually, gives him a hug, and then they kind of move on. He kind of melts away, and he kind of upgrades his experience. Have you had any?
I have, and
Okay.
I find that when I hear other explorers talk about phenomena of that nature, I find, because of my own experiences, what is usually happening is they're having a projection within an experience. So even if they're out of their bodies, they can project dream type material, which is based on, inner fears within an environment, within a sort of a consensus environment, as Bullman would call them. So it's sometimes a matter of realizing that what we're dealing with is our own inner stuff, for sure, and it is a method for us to become, to transform this energy. But I find that sometimes, as nice as it is to transform a slug into something more friendly and sit and wave it goodbye, I would take an opportunity, whether in that moment or back on Earth, to ask deep probing questions. What did that represent? Now, I know from reading William's book, he did a lot of that. There was one experience that he talks about where he's in some sort of underground car park or car garage, and there's a car where these thieves are breaking into the car, or no, it was there was a bunch of junk cluttered in the car, and he asked what it represented, and his subconscious, or a bigger part of his consciousness, gave him some insight. And so I know he does that sort of practice. But I would say to people, yes, if you get an experience like that where you're being challenged, where you're having these sort of fear-inducing experiences, you can confront it, but equally you can run,
Yeah.
because sometimes it will be overwhelming. And I think, as nice as it is to say, hey, we can be brave and stand our ground, sometimes even I, to this day, my courage sometimes fails me. But I know that these tests aren't tests of failure. They're just saying, this stuff is here to work on. This is an area to apply some practice. It's never about failure. So, there are many ways to look at this, but that's one of my ways to look at it, that even in the moment when I look away, if I don't feel courageous enough, I know other opportunities will come up. I know I can come back to my physical body. I can get into meditation. I can access the same phenomena, but in a sort of an observer way, instead of through the out-of-body way, which was usually more, sort of interactive.
I do have to ask, can you describe the Pandoras Star? I know we're kind of switching gears real quick, but I just want to make sure you got that in before.
Yeah, sure. Yes, Pandora's Star is what we label a deep trance meditation machine. And it is about the size of a small frying pan. It doesn't weigh, very much. It has 12 high-powered LEDs, sort of front-facing. So what you do is you put it on a tripod, and you sit in front of it, maybe a couple feet away. You close your eyes for the experience. So although they're only LEDs and they're not going to blind you like the sun, they're not going to damage your eyes. To get the most from it, you would close your eyes. Now, it's computer controlled, so you can pretty much go from very low frequency, such as 0.1 hertz, all the way up over the gamma, the hyper gamma, the lambda frequencies, which are 40, 100, and 200 hertz respectively, and everything in between. So you can use this for brainwave entrainment, but this is light pulses, which will entrain your brain within, in some cases, seconds, minutes to seconds, where a sound can take minutes minimum, sometimes even longer. So this, once you switch it on, let's say you have one of the alpha programs that we use, which creates a very, very psychedelic experience. Immediately, it will focus you with bright, vivid colors, very rich color, geometric patterns like mandalas, three-dimensional in your mind's eye. I think people are really surprised by how powerful an experience it can be. We did a Mind Body Spirit Festival here in London just a couple weeks ago, and we had a Buddhist monk pass by the stand, and I got to talking to him about the machine, and he'd said, okay, look, I've done meditation for over 20 years. I don't know what kind of aid this could be for me. And I already knew he was underestimating himself. If he was underestimating the machine, he was underestimating himself. Because ultimately, there's nothing this machine can show you that you don't already have within you. This is just a way of helping you get from A to B, faster and more reliably, to where you can then build it as a practice, as a long-term practice yourself, almost like training wheels, but it's a fun training wheel to have. So we sat the monk down, closed his eyes, gave him a 4-minute dose, just 4 minutes. He came off that session reporting that, yes, he can see how this can be beneficial to people from many walks of life. So it was a good little endorsement. We didn't need the endorsement because we have average everyday human beings. We had at the same show 2 university students come who are used to LSD. They sat down, they took a journey, took a trip. As language of that going correctly for them. They took a trip. 4 minutes later, they were like, "Wow, dude, this was amazing!" But without the drugs and the residue of what the drug does. So on a basic level, this will give people a powerful, psychedelic, mystical experience. It can go as deep as they want. It's just a matter of getting out of the way. Set your purpose, have your intent, and then get out of the way. And what I mean by being in the way is you try to maybe too much in your head, trying to analyze what's taking place. Maybe let fear get too overwhelming, because when you suddenly have this rich color palette, and it's a sort of a firestorm of color and vivid imagery, it can get very overwhelming. But if you can allow yourself, once you feel the shift, almost as if you're going to go out of body, if you just for that moment draw upon some courage and say, hey, let's see where this goes. Because why begin a new experience only to stop again and again and again, because you're only going to get to the level that you know too well. So we ask people just to use the machine as open-mindedly as they can, let themselves take a journey, open them up so it, surrender to the light. So what can it be used for? It's very good at getting people into a trance state, like I said, very effectively, very reliably, very quickly. We've had people enter trance states, and I mean deep, profound trance states, within like a minute. And completely be somewhere else. Their eyes will go wide open while the session is still going, and it'll look as if their eyes are rolling back in their head. They're no longer there on this level of reality. They're somewhere else. And we've had people come back and report, wow, I was sitting next to a stream. I was fully conscious. I wasn't even aware that I was here and the light was flashing. And their eyes were wide open and the light flashing in their eyes, and they weren't aware of it. So it can help get people, it facilitates frequency states. So it can shift people into ideal frequencies for out-of-body exploration. Obviously, like I said, they can still get in the way of the experience, but it's a great exploration tool for anything, for personal development, for brain training. You can take this thing up. I was exploring a frequency yesterday, which is based on some research back from the 1990s, where this scientist, this researcher had, he was using sound to close down the left prefrontal lobe and fully activate more of the right prefrontal lobe, which created a sense of deeper empathy. He literally created a state of empathy. And if you can imagine on a daily basis triggering this frequency state, which was 110 hertz hypogamma, for myself on a daily basis, I now get a dose of 40 hertz gamma frequency. So I'm creating more gamma waves within me, which is very good for stimulating my brain, which is essential for stimulating my brain. There are some people with mental deficiencies and other sort of disorders where they're not getting enough gamma waves. So this machine has the ability to give them a full spectrum frequency experience, helps facilitate whatever frequency they'd like to experience for whatever practice they currently have. So if they're a channeler, this will help them get into that channeling, the frequencies associated with channeling more reliably, faster, help them maintain those states in order for them to deepen their what they have themselves anyhow. So it's a facilitator, just like I would be at one of my workshops. And it's a tool that went from being a DIY project to now being a production model, which we now sell. And we do have a website for it, which we've only just launched. It is something that the website is still in development. The product certainly isn't. Although we do, almost on a monthly basis now, we have new ways of upgrading the software for it that comes with it too. So it's an exploration tool, and it's a really good exploration tool for consciousness. Anywhere from astral projection, lucid dreaming, mediumship, automatic writing, channeling, rewiring the brain with neuroplasticity. It's a powerful tool.
It's kind of like HemiSync for the eyes.
Yes, and you could say there was an artist back in the 70s who developed a dream machine. I think he called it the dream machine or lucid dream machine, and where it was just a rotating sort of lampshade with a light behind it, with the sort of holes cut out in the fabric of the lampshade. And as it spins, it just sort of flickers, and that flickering light creates imagery. And he would used to bill it as it's the only art installation that you view with your eyes closed. So once again, on a basic level, you get this beautiful sort of artistic experience, which is being self-generated from within, because all the light is doing, it's shining, it's flickering white light at you. But your brain is literally sort of filtering out all the color, and all the different patterns is being self-generated based on your neurology of the brain, based on your sort of beliefs, all of that stuff. Even the way you breathe during the session will have an impact on what you experience.
How can somebody get a hold of one like now?
Okay.
I know you're...
The website, like I said, the website at the moment is highly underdeveloped because we're having too much fun, and we've been going to trade shows and demonstrating the model. So if they want to get information, the quicker way to get information is to come through to me via email, and they can reach me at Todd, that's TODD, at PandoraStar.co.uk. And if you send me an email, then I'll send you a bunch of blurb that should be on the website but isn't there at the moment. And I'll give you the pricing and the different ways to experience it. If you're local to London, then you can have a demonstration. One of these lights are currently in New York, so there's an opportunity for you, Mike, if you'd like to go and have a personal experience of Pandoras Star. I can certainly facilitate that if you like, and then you can give your listeners your own direct feedback.
Yeah, I'm sure April and I... especially, we'll definitely want to check that out because, like you said, with the HemiSync, it could take, minutes or longer. And I've noticed with myself, I've been doing HemiSync on and off for the last 4 or 5 years now. And there's definitely, it is better than just straight up meditation or at least in my experience, trying to get an out-of-body experience or some altered state. But there is a delay. It's like some of those spontaneous out-of-body experiences I've had were usually about a 12-hour delay from me listening to HemiSync.
Yeah. Well, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say that, trying something new, especially visual, and I'm more of a visual person anyway, or at least that's what I tell myself. But I think having, especially with the LEDs and, the white light, I think that's definitely more of a trigger for me, at least somebody like me, I think might help more. And not to downplay HemiSync, because I know it's helped, thousands and thousands of people. But I think this is kind of filling in the gap that the HemiSync can't reach. And it's more for the like you said, you have the different, the clairaudience, clairsentience. This is more for the other type.
Yeah. And one thing I'd like you to keep in mind as well, Mike, is the whole time this light is on, these focusing rays of light directly on your forehead, directly into your eyes, this is affecting not just your physical body. You have to understand here that for those of us who are fully with the program, that we are not just physical beings, but we are psychic and we are psychological and we are spiritual beings as well, then we have counterpart energy. So our energy body, this light, this Pandoras Star, the device itself has a counterpart energy too. there's nothing on this level reality that doesn't have an anchor on another level reality. There's energy states, a spectrum of energy for everything. So you have a physical version and you have a non-physical version of this light, of this Pandora star. So as it sits there in front of you, it's working with the neurology of your brain, lighting up your brain basically. Equally, it's working with you on an energetic level, because the energy counterpart would do that too. So you're being stimulated physically as well as energetically. Also, as the light is on, flashing the entire time, on, off, on, off, on, off, it is stimulating your pineal gland. So this is a powerful machine. It's touching you in ways that, fair enough, sound might have certain limitations. This is like binaural sound on steroids. It is really powerful stuff. We've had people that have used all kinds of things, had, ayahuasca journeys, LSD. We've had people that have used, DMT. And they've used this lamp not at the same time, but that would be interesting too, I'm sure. But they've used the Pandoras Star, and they're like, whoa, that gave me a very similar experience to when I was on ayahuasca. And they're like, but without the ayahuasca, so it facilitates. Again, it's the light itself. The Pandoras Star is facilitating frequency states, and frequency states have associations with them. With regards to well-being, with regards to relaxation, with regards to expanded states of awareness. So, this is a very powerful, dependable tool for facilitating these frequency states. Ultimately, we live in a universe which is, like Campbell would suggest, Tom Campbell would say, is about pure experimentation and perhaps knows no limits. I mean, personally, for me, the way I view it, the universe I live in, as in my own belief systems, it's a universe that can even surprise itself. And that's the kind of universe I'd like to live in, and that's the one that I sort of maintain myself in, if you like. I appreciate all the various belief systems and experiences that people have with regards to non-human consciousness, these other planes of reality. And one thing I'd really like to sort of, from my perspective, from my viewpoint, trail off with this interview, is all of this is there to explore. And if this is something that you're open to, explore it with everything you've got. Leave no stone unturned. Ask questions prolifically along the way. But we are equally here in what we label the third dimension, physical, waking consciousness, Earth, our physical lives. I would really like to inspire people to look at this journey that you're taking, because at one point you would have been stood there on the astral planes, like Robert Monroe would suggest, at one of these nondescript astral entry points where you can reserve a physical body. They start to meld your energy to the physicality, and then you get to explore maybe some of the in-between states, some of the the holographic levels that are training environments for physical reality. You get to bounce between the womb and these environments and your other lives on other levels, as you integrate more and more into physical. At one point, you would have stood there looking at physical reality. You had the grand tour, you took the brochure, you really put the down payment. You're like, oh yeah, I'm ready to have one of those physical matter bodies. I can't wait. We're here to equally enjoy this too. To me, it is a full spectrum experience. And sometimes, people, they get too focused in areas of their lives where there's pain and suffering, and they dwell in these places for too long. So I'd like to really finish off with the idea of, making a suggestion to them to be open again, to explore beyond that dwelling state once again, to realize that no matter how much they've got on their plate, at one point they were so excited about taking this human physical matter journey and being here on physical Earth. They were really, really excited standing at that astral entry point, couldn't wait, looking at all the other humans, on physical Earth, sort of whining about how difficult it is and thinking them, laughing to themselves, I don't mind. I've told my guides, I've signed on the dotted line. I tell them, shovel all that at me, give it to me. It's kind of like, in America, we love our parades. Yep. And you see people sort of in the parade, they're on the floats, and you look at them and you're envious sometimes, like, oh, I wish I could be on a float. And then these guys come by, after the horses go by, and they drop their droppings, and they're shoveling, the horse poo. And you're thinking, and you might be laughing at these guys, but you know what? They're at least in the parade. And that's the
Right.
way I look at this. No matter how much human crap we have to shovel while we're here, there's a part of us that was there on the Astral on one of those days looking this way, thinking, just give me a big shovel. I'll shovel all of it. I'll shovel human, stuff like nobody's ever shoveled it before. Just give it to me. I'm ready. I can do this. I'm prepared. I'm part of this all that is. I've got, the only limitations are the mindsets I develop while I'm there. No matter how much you prepare yourself, once you cross that boundary point into this level of consciousness, all that planning can go out the door, but that guidance is always there. Your guides, your helpers, what we call in spirituality, higher self, your soul, like Mike Monroe would suggest your eye there, all that energy is here. It's always here to draw upon. It's realities within realities when our belief systems get in the way, but that stuff is here and it's right there waiting for you to get clear again and tap into. No matter what your life is like here in the in-body experience, it can get better. And all of this stuff that Mike's talking about, I'm talking about, you can open yourself up to again, and it's all there to explore. But it won't happen, if the in-body experience is overwhelming. You've got support on these levels. You've got, people like me, people like Mike and April who are getting these messages out from people like Tom Campbell and William Bowman and Teal Swan, all these amazing facilitators around the world. There is support there. And yes, you can say, okay, well, what's the level of support? Well, you got to show up. The support's there. You have to show up, just like the support from the universe. It's a matter of showing up. But you show up and you'll find it. And life doesn't have to be hard. And, these embodied experiences can lead to some very profound experiences here. And then you open yourself up to all that you are again. And it just gets fun all around.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great way to end the show. And it's kind of like, I don't know if you have it over in the UK, but in the United States, especially New York, there used to be a lottery commercial where the saying was, you got to be in it to win it. So, that,
Indeed.
yeah, that's great. That was great. Well, thanks
Mike.
Todd, for coming on the show. If somebody wants to get in touch with you or attend one of your workshops, how can they get a hold of you?
I would say my website, which is the website where there's the most current event right now, is www.obefrance.com. From there, you can find other links to other stuff. If you go into YouTube and type in my name, Todd Acamesis, that's Acamesis, you'll find loads of videos, including a lot of fun stuff where I'm, just being as playful as I can be, and just in some cases being pure goofy, but that can facilitate certain states too. So those are methods. Another method is, like I said, with email. If you use my Pandoras Star email address, so Todd at 2Ds at PandoraStar.co.uk, just send me an email. It doesn't have to be about Pandora. And if you have a question, then I'm quite happy to answer. It may take me a while sometimes because I do get a lot of contact from people, but I will eventually get back to everybody.
If you'd like more information about our films or to purchase our DVDs, you can head on over to our website at thepastseries.com. They're also available to purchase on Amazon.com.
Our films are also streaming online at Vimeo.com, GaiamTV.com, and iTunes.
If you have a show suggestion or would like us to interview someone specifically, please feel free to shoot us an email at info@thepastseries.com or send us a tweet at thepastseries.
Please rate and review us in iTunes and subscribe.
We hope you enjoyed the show.